Hello, good afternoon. My name is James Slatter. I'm from a company called Dynamon. Today, I'm going to be sharing some insights in how our company connects the dots between data, fleet data, and how fleets can move to effective, operationally effective and cost efficient fleet electrification. There's a lot that's been talked about and will continue to be talked about around fleet electrification and what that entails from vehicles, from batteries, from charging, from grid, from costs. It's a challenging topic. And it's got to be done over what seems like a long time, but it's going to go by quite quickly. And so putting some organization in that and some structure so that fleets can have a managed and importantly, that effective transition is super important. So I just wanted to share a little bit about Dynamon, who we are, where we're from, software package that we've developed to help bring the data into some really useful, accurate insights, and then show you some examples of some of the projects we've done and the type of insights that are available, just to help paint that better picture on how you transfer that raw fleet information into something that's truly tangible and will really help fleets, make that transition over time to electric vehicles. So Dynamon, we're a company based in the UK. We actually come from the background of the University of Southampton. Our founder, Angus Webb, used to work with the Great Britain Olympic team back in the 2012 Olympics, and was all about just incremental improvement in sporting teams. The difference between silver and gold, amazing stuff. And he built simulation tools so they can test different theories, different scenarios, and just find those little tenths of a second or hundreds of a second impact on changing equipment or changing bike or changing tire, and running those simulations and seeing what's going to really work. And after that process, he was looking for a mission critical area to transition that technology, that simulation tools into, to make an impact. And the decision was made to move that into the transport industry. And so we've been working with transport companies for the last 8-9 years in how to help them simulate scenarios so they can make better procurement and purchasing decisions on what to do around fuel, tires. And 4 years ago, we started developing a platform around EV transition, which we're going to get on later. But a lot of it is around just saving fuel, saving money, reducing CO2 are the areas that we play in, and the software platforms we have, go into those areas. The products that we have available, a product called Zero, which is what we're going to be talking about today, which is around that EV transition, how to make this process just simpler, how to give really good insights so that fleets can make the best decisions around how to go through that process. We also have what we call a tire analytics application where we can run simulations and do trials on what a good tire procurement process would look like for fleets. Aerodynamics has a massive impact for fleets around fuel economy, and so we can help them understand for the truck or van or trailers what aerodynamic package would make most sense for them to maximize their fuel savings and the CO2 savings. And then we can also do other trial programs where people want to test not just tires or aero, but route optimization and other different scenarios that they want to test, where they want to make sure that things are measured accurately so that they know that the cause effect is measured and can be deduced very easily around, if I've done this, I can absolutely put any occurrence or any result down to what I've done here. It's not open to outside or external interpretation. Some of the customers we work with, some really big global names there: tire companies, delivery companies, large, small, last mile, long range trucking companies, a whole various OEMs. We play a lot with those companies as well, where they're looking to help their customers, get accurate insights about how to, again, walk that transition to electrification for their fleet. So lots of different types of customers. They're charging infrastructure companies as well, where they're looking to just get better insights about what they should build for their customers, around grid capacity, charging infrastructure. So there's a lot of different scenarios we can run here and a lot of different insights that we can provide. Getting more into the EV side. So, some of this most people have heard about, talked about, lost sleep about, worried about, thinking about, is what are the challenges around, EV, ownership. A lot of talk is, I have to move to EV and it doesn't really matter what it's going to cost me. I'm being told I have to move anyway. How can we make that process just a lot more effective for the fleet when they're making these decisions? They're making the best decisions and for the best, welfare for their company as well. So with EVs, we know that they cost more than their fuel equivalent. We understand that. We know there's challenges around residual values or knowing what they're going to be. We've had feedback. There's enough EVs out there on the market now. We can see that they're doing quite well in terms of service and maintenance costs, certainly compared to their fuel and diesel counterparts. And there's also differences in terms of what it takes to fuel these things. We know what the cost of fuel is. We know what that is, but how much is it going to cost me to fuel my EV up, be it in the depot, be it at home, be it in public charging? So there's different variables that make the cost of ownership of an EV either good, bad, or indifferent, and we're trying to find that area that just makes sense for the fleet. And where does it come from? Depots. A lot of talk about how do we energize depots? How do we make that work? How do we make sure that we build the infrastructure depot that's going to be effective for your fleet? Is your fleet coming in, going out at the start of the day and then coming at the end of the day, and it's all staying in overnight? So to facilitate overnight charging, that sounds great. But if I've got 30 vehicles coming into that depot, do I have space for 30 chargers? Do I have enough grid capacity to feed those 30 vehicles at the same time? Depot charging is very handy because it's the cheapest way of doing things. And it has a low impact on the operation. Typically, vehicles are coming in and out, but you have those issues with grid capacity, and that seems to be a big challenge. It's not just within the US, but globally. There's challenges around just, creating enough energy, but then getting it to where it needs to be. And I'm sure most from this call have their own stories or heard of other stories of fleets when they're trying to energize a depot, even just a little bit, that can take quite a long time, or cost quite a lot of money to increase that. So how can we just see the most effective way to utilize what's already in a depot, or minimize what I have to do to that depot to start getting some effective EV transition in place? I don't need to electrify 30 vehicles all at once. If I've only got 30 vehicles, maybe I'm only doing 2 or 3 to start with. So how do we start looking into how I electrify enough to feed 2 or 3 vehicles? And then a year after that, maybe 4 or 5 vehicles. And how do I transition that? How do I get that in, that visibility? And it's all in the data, but I'll get into that later. Public charging, it's challenging for commercial vehicles because it has such an impact on operations. It occurs there. It's, trying to marry it up with a driver's break time is challenging. It's not always convenient. It can cause downtimes. And you've also got the energy, the general availability, the speed, how much time, different levels of charges that you're looking for. So there's definitely challenges with public charging. No doubt better, and there's a lot of investment and push to improving that, but it's still in those early stages. In 20 years' time, we'll be worrying why we even talked about this 20 years ago, but we're not there yet. So there's a lot of things that we have to get done to make those right decisions for a fleet's operation. And home charging, not all fleets have depot-based vehicles. There's a lot of service fleets where the vehicles go home with the driver overnight. There's a lot of challenges with that, though, because some homes don't have access to a driveway or don't have access to a charger. It's rented accommodation. So how can we work through those challenges? How can we work through for those particular fleets the best way to electrify those vehicles to make sure they're on the road when they need to be and they're available to be on the road, and it's done effectively and cost effectively? So how do we supplement home charging, maybe with public charging or with depot charging, so it's still a cost-effective program? So again, lots of moving parts here. There's advantages to each of them. There's also some challenges with each of them. When we engage with a fleet, or when we engage with one of our partners that is working with the fleet, the questions are similar. Where do we start? That's a really big one. People see the the big ticket cost of buying a vehicle, and they hear about cheaper energy, but they're not sure about what to buy. So what they'll do is they'll go and buy a couple of EVs, they'll put them into operations, probably typically put them in a very low mileage operation. That's just not going to be cost effective. But scaling up a couple of EVs into a depot wide or even a fleet wide process over time is challenging, and to make sure that you right size the vehicles and the batteries, the energy that you need to feed on that is all of this is a challenge. So being able to do some simulations to predict what is likely to work, but also what is likely not to work is probably as important, is a way of being able to get this done, plan this properly ahead of starting to scale up into EVs. We can see that we can't rely on and nothing against the OEMs and the WLTP data that we get from those vehicles, but it's not based on, varying payloads of different fleets. It's not based on where these vehicles are driven, from the mountains to the plains to urban to motorway to rural. There's all these different operating areas. Temperature has a massive impact. So it's important to accurately forecast what vehicles will actually do in a real world environment, because you need to then forecast the energy. What type of charger should I use? Level 1, 2, or 3? There's multiple different options, but which one should I put into? And is there going to be enough energy to feed those chargers? How can I get a good view, accurate view of what the TCO? And TCO is an interesting term used by different things, but financial planning. How do we work through, if a vehicle needs to be replaced, it's coming up for a replacement cycle, what do I replace it with? How can we accurately compare what the cost is going to be like to run a fuel vehicle versus an EV vehicle? But also, how do you do this when you've got independent validation on, your fleet's operations, that what we're saying is going to happen actually works, versus someone that maybe, is selling a service or selling something else? How can you get that independent validation that things are going to work? So these are the customers, these are the problems, these are the things that are keeping people awake at night that we talk to, and that what we want to go through and improve with software, with using data. So I want to introduce Zero. It's a software platform that we've developed. It's a data analytics platform. It simulates multiple scenarios using fleet data, to help the fleet get a view of what's going to work for them over time to achieve an electrified fleet. And as I said, it's okay to say that I can't electrify these vehicles now. That's fine, because this is going to take time. But what vehicles can I upgrade? What vehicles can I move to that? What vehicles make sense? And stress test them. Where can I put them where I'm going to get a good return? They're going to do lots of miles. I can use some cheap energy, but I'm not going to be left with a vehicle that's operationally left on the side of the road running out of charge. How do we do these things? So we want to give confidence to fleets that before they write a check, before they make their decisions on vehicles, specifications, batteries, grid, charging infrastructure, give them the confidence that what they're going to invest into will work. And that's what's super important here, and make the best procurement decisions. So the areas that Zero works into covers around, hang on, I got a thing here. Oh, there you go. So I just got a little note. These are the different areas that the system covers in terms of the area. So transition planning, like what it looks like, EV selection, what vehicle to choose, infrastructure design, cost analysis, grid, tariff comparisons, very important, public charging, route optimization. So these are the areas that we play in. So it's not just what vehicle, it's looking at, what vehicle, what infrastructure, what grid. So it's looking at that entire journey of working through how a fleet can go from point A to point B and all the steps in the middle effectively. And looking at that from an area of what's required, we like to use telematic data. It's very, very data rich. It gives us all the information we need around where the vehicles are going, when they're dwelling, when they're stopping, where they're going. If we don't have telematics data, we can take routing data. That's also very, very data rich. If there's a challenge where we don't have access to good data, or you may not want to give access to telematics data to start with, and you just want to do a little trial, we can actually create some what we call synthetic data. So you can actually create routes, you can create telematics to start doing some hypothesizing about what's going to work. So you've got some nice options there. Transition planning. which vehicles are going to be the easiest or most challenging, and which of the depots are going to be the easiest or most challenging to electrify based on their daily operations, based on replacement vehicles, based on dwell time. So we can get that level of information very, very easily and quickly. EV selection, I touched on this just before, super important. We get an accurate range prediction for a vehicle, we can then get an accurate energy prediction. If you assume a certain range and it's out by 10, 15, 20%, or you assume a WLTP is correct, you could be 30, 40% out on a cold or a really hot day. And therefore you'll be over or underestimating the amount of energy, which then has a massive impact on grid design, grid capacity, and infrastructure. So understanding how much mileage you're going to get out of particular vehicles is super important. We have a database of vehicles that we've tested and validated in different operating conditions, different payloads, pulling trailers, refrigeration unit on the back. Super important to really accurately predict how much energy these vehicles are going to use. Because once we get to there, we then want to start looking at, well, I need all this energy in my depot. What infrastructure do I need to feed that? So getting an idea of which chargers, what power chargers, how many chargers, all super important. And what is my grid? I mean, it's a massive issue across country, and it's expensive and it's timely. So if you're going to go and make an investment into upgrading a grid, you want to make sure that it's going to be fit for purpose, that it is going to be enough. And also you don't want to be overpaying. You don't want to be putting in too much just because you think you need to put in an extra barrier. And so the idea is to get more accurate information, into your hands so you can make those, much better decisions. Tariff optimization is a standard single tariff for the entire day best suited for your operations, or is hourly tariffs better suited for your operations, and compare the impact of public charging tariffs and home tariffs as well on your entire operation. Because we can predict energy very accurately, we can see when you're going to be using energy at what time of the day and how much. You can then get a really accurate prediction of what tariff would work for you. So it's a really important point that goes into your total financial planning model. Public charging, if you do need areas of either a little or a lot of public charging, we can overlay public charging network data to your fleet operations to see where you're going to be low on energy, and overlay where you can see that public charging to get those opportunity top ups to get you back to the depot or get you back to home where's that cheap energy that you want to use. So you can overlay that to give you confidence that there's solutions in this process. And cost analysis, again, really important. We want this to be a situation where, as you move to EV, you're not sacrificing the economic viability of a fleet. You don't want to just be buying a vehicle, putting it in, cost you a lot of money, not maximizing its value, but to compare the cost of buying an ICE vehicle, a diesel vehicle, a fuel vehicle, to an EV vehicle with all the different input costs, any different subsidies that you can get a hold of to help make that work better for you, and then getting an accurate prediction on, is that going to be cheaper or cost more or be about the same, is important, because we can predict how much energy. So it's super important with that. Now, just a couple of quick examples of the type of analysis that we get involved in. I've got 3 different scenarios here. This is just a single a single page in terms of a last mile grocery delivery fleet we did in the UK that went ahead and deployed EVs and charging into 3 of their depots. They did internal analysis and they said, right, we're just going to buy and to understand what they did, we're just going to we bought the biggest batteries they could, and they put a single charger in for every single vehicle they had. They put that in. They came to us after the fact and said, actually, could you just validate if there was a better way of doing this? And through the process, we were able to see that even though they predicted that was the best solution for them, they could have gotten by with buying lesser spec vehicles. Based on their data, based on the telematics, we could see that they could get away with lesser spec vehicles, which was cheaper vehicles and different scales, tiers of battery. I mean, it costs quite a lot of money, so this is a big deal. But also they didn't need all the different chargers they put in. So they overinvested in chargers. And they were investing almost $200,000 per depot between the vehicles and the charging infrastructure, more than they need to make that depot operationally effective. So if you extrapolate that out, it turns out to be a huge amount of money. $50 million is what we predicted if they kept investing and deploying as they're going to. They would have overspent on this process. We also were able to identify that would electrify 270 of their 300 depots, where they only thought they could do 60, and they were really concerned by that. So we're able to find much more flexibility in how to electrify their fleet over time, and so it's operationally effective. Now I wanted to take you through a case we did for it's a heavy vehicle fleet, but just the concepts of the type of insights are really, really useful. We took a download of their information. They had about 80 trucks in a single depot up in Scotland. We got a month's worth of data, and they wanted to understand what it was going to be like to try and electrify these operations. And once we got the telematics data in, we saw that a lot of the vehicles actually didn't return to that depot. So they just gave us a month's worth of data, and we saw a lot of vehicles going all over the country. And they were then ending up with, what we would call low charge warnings all over the country. And so we had to work out, well, which one of these vehicles are actually going to come back, because we were trying to electrify this particular depot. So we had to go through that. But we saw that there were big challenges with these vehicles, because taking out the ones that didn't come back to the depot at all, like in the next month, the vehicles that were based there, a lot of them weren't even coming back to the depot overnight, and they were staying out for any opportunity charging or anything. So we didn't have a good scenario for their vehicles. And you can see here that, yeah, like this is a score out of 10 in terms of the viability to electrify these vehicles, and the best was about 4.4 out of 10, which isn't good. It's not a good score to try and understand where, and you can see here there's a lot there that, like, scoring 1, they were just doing too many miles, they weren't coming back into the depot, and we weren't able to, and for the initial purpose, we weren't simulating outside opportunity charging, like public charging or something. So we only saw that less than 20% of their journeys could be electrified, is what we saw. There's a lot of red in this. Green means that we were completing those journeys. Red means we weren't. So like less than 20%. And it didn't really matter if we used a 150 kilowatt charger or a 325. The vehicles just weren't in the depot long enough to make any impact. The highest duty cycle was like 40% of any vehicle, but we weren't able to, using this analysis, we would see that without some changes, we couldn't actually electrify any of their vehicles. But we did see that there was vehicles that had 30% or more of their duty cycles could be electrified, could be done. So this is an example of what you see when you bring the data in, is that with this is a vehicle, and this is showing the state of charge over a week. And what you can see is that it's got flat lines as when it's dwelling, when it's stopping. That would be overnight because it's stopped. And there's no peaks there. There's no charging going on. So it hasn't come back to the main depot to be charged. So you can see that during the week, it's not coming back to the depot for opportunity charging. So it runs out of charge. So it's not just, if we could find an area that this thing could get some charge, then it's quite possible that this vehicle could be electrified, but it would need to have some operational changes or recognition of charging it where this vehicle is stopping, if it's stopping outside the other depot. So what we did is you're able to then do some heat and some hotspot analysis on the dwell time. So looking at all their fleet, where are these vehicles stopping? Like, where are they stopping a lot? So you can actually have a look at, and through that dwelling, you can pick sites that actually we've got quite a few vehicles stopping for an extended period in these locations. Maybe that's a charging location. So based on doing some dwell analysis and going, well, actually, let's put some charging here, we can then put some additional charging in, and we can then start seeing that actually we can electrify a lot more journeys, and we're able to actually electrify at 2 of the vehicles fully. So that's their starting point. So with this, that we can now confidently say that we can electrify 2 of your vehicles. I know it doesn't sound like much out of 80, but this is just a start. We're trying to get some starting points here, get some vehicles into there and cost effectively. But we had another 8 vehicles are over 50%. So with some additional analysis, I'm sure we can put in some additional charging points that make the electrification of these vehicles cost effective and suitable. And this is just an example where you can see the state of charge over the week, where it goes back up the steep charging areas, and it doesn't go below 70% in terms of state of charge because it's getting top-up charging during the day. So this is a very feasible vehicle to electrify. Where it gets really interesting in terms of infrastructure is going, well, what do we need to simulate how many charges and how much energy do I need? So we can run different simulations in a matter of minutes about how many charges and what you need. So if you've got 56 vehicles and you put in 56 chargers and you plug them all in and you walk away, we were able to ascertain that you actually only needed 40 of those chargers working because of just moving vehicles around in the time and the dwell time they were in the depot. But what you can see here, there's the chart on the bottom where I've got the red arrow. You can see that's the grid capacity. It's about 500 kilowatts, but you can see the blue, it's breaking through the grid. I mean, there's a massive amount. And so we worked out that peak energy demand was going to be 3.5 megawatts of power. So that's a big lot of power we need. We're able to run a different simulation to say, okay, if I had somebody there that was moving my vehicles around and plugging them in when they needed to be plugged in and plugged out and moved away, what could I do? So that's what we call a managed service. And with that, we ascertain that we could get away with only having 6 chargers, massive cost difference between 6 chargers to 40 chargers. We can charge all the vehicles. The peak energy demand dropped to below 2 megawatts of power. So you've got a massive saving there in terms of the cost of energy you're going to put in. We're also able to simulate, well, actually, if we put in some additional battery storage, we could actually decrease that peak energy demand even further, 500 kilowatts or a megawatt of battery storage. So these simulations can be done using the fleet data to give the fleet confidence about what to go and do for that particular depot with confidence, with accuracy. They can do that. And we can pick and choose a number of vehicles and do this simulation out for 5 vehicles instead of 80 and understand what 5 vehicles would need. That gives you an idea of what we can do with, when you're talking vehicles and infrastructure. This is another case study we did with a service vehicle fleet, so with vans. And because we do analysis and reports for the customer, it's very bespoke. So you can see there's a difference in the look and feel of the different types of reporting. This was an 8 depot location, and it had half its fleet was home based. It was about 100 vehicles, and so we have a different level of small depots and trying to ascertain which of these can be electrified. So we do a geofence to each of the locations so we can see exactly where they're coming into. We're able to give an accurate estimated range. So we have the battery size, the WLTP, and then harsh miles is like when it's really cold or really hot. Ideal ranges, lovely, spring temperatures when everyone's out and having fun and it's not too hot and it's all lovely. And we can get a guide of what that looks like, and then the feasibility of how many routes can be actually electrified. So we're able to do those analyses. And then through this, we then compare vehicles. We've got, for example, 3 different types of vehicles here, different battery sizes. And we're able to see quite quickly which vehicle is practical to be used to electrify for the different vehicles in each of the different operations, home-based operation, as well as a depot-based operation. We're able to put in the impact of some home charging top up for vehicles as well. You see that on the right hand side, that if we had some home charging for some of these vehicles, that it would actually improve the amount of completed days that you would have. So this is just to give the fleet a very good idea about what is possible, what is suitable, and then get into a which vehicle analysis. And so this is just an example of one of the depots. We're able to see that what the best charger infrastructure. We've got 6 by 11 kilowatts. We've got a 1 by 50 with a managed solution. So again, if they've only got limited space in the site, having 1 or 2 chargers could be a really important point. So being able to find that solution is super important. We're able to see that the current fuse limit that's within that site will be enough to facilitate the charging of that fleet over the day when they come in, when they need that charge. So we're able to see that very accurately as to that particular site and the vehicles in there to give it confidence. And then when we're going into each individual vehicle, this is a number of vehicles and then what they call their north-based. Again, comparing the 3 vehicles, we can see again very accurately that the Mercedes Sprinter had a very high completion rate. So for their home-based vehicles that are doing a bit more mileage, certainly the much bigger battery was the better option for them, but gave them the confidence that even in cold temperatures, winter days, doing extended miles, it was still going to be strong enough and big enough to facilitate that process. We can give summary information around how much energy is going to be needed around and where it comes from, home and public and home and depot. But the last couple of slides here, super important, are the TCO charges, the cost of ownership, the financial planning, is to give the fleet leadership a view of what vehicles can be transitioned to EV and when. So you can see here, this is the last slide, guys, is that this is a view over the next, 8 years, what the journey is going to look like when the vehicles are going to be transitioned based on economic viability and operational viability. So there's a lot of data there's a lot of insights you can get walking a process, so that as you start the journey to do electrification, you can do it with accurate data, accurate insights, and have that confidence that the investments you're going to make are going to be fit for purpose. But do it as you need to, right size it. Make the upgrades as you need to. If it's 2 or 3 vehicles, then it's 2 or 3, and right size that. But if it needs to be 50 in 5 years, what do I need in 5 years' time? So I hope that was useful. I hope that was insightful. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at Dynamon. I'd be more than happy to help you and to talk to you more. Thank you very much.